You know, some stories are chilling because of what we see, but this one is terrifying because of what we don't. It all takes place inside a small Florida camper. There are no cameras, no other witnesses, just one man and a 2-year-old girl who suffers an injury so catastrophic it's almost unbelievable. The story that man tells just doesn't add up, and it's about to be completely shattered by a single horrifying truth found by the medical examiner.
Yeah, that's the sentence. 4 words that changed absolutely everything in this investigation. It's the simple, brutal fact that detectives would eventually drop on the man who claimed he had no idea what happened. But before we get to that moment, we have to start at the very beginning, with an emergency call that was strange from the second it came in.
Alright, so let's set the scene. It's May 3rd, 2022. A case manager at a hospital over in Tavares, Florida, picks up the phone and calls the police.
I have a 2-year-old that was brought in with suspected abuse. The baby's being transferred to the ICU at Ascent Health, Orlando.
A 2-year-old girl, her name is Jacquelyn, has just been brought in. She's in full cardiac arrest, and the hospital staff, well, they suspect abuse. So, right off the bat, something's weird here. The first thing that jumps out to investigators is how they called for help. Instead of dialing 911 right there from the camper where the little girl was hurt, her mother, Kristen, and her boyfriend, Travis Thompson, put this unresponsive toddler in a car and they just start driving. They only call for an ambulance after they've pulled over at a random barbecue restaurant on the side of the road. I mean, that's the first huge red flag, right?
And let's break down this timeline, because it is absolutely crucial. The police figured out that a full 37 minutes went by between the moment Travis says he found Jacquelyn unresponsive and the moment someone finally called 911. In an emergency, they talk about the golden hour, right? That critical window to save a life. 37 minutes, that's not just a delay, it's an eternity. So the question that's just hanging in the air for investigators is simple. What on earth were they doing for 37 minutes?
So, naturally, all eyes immediately turned to 24-year-old Travis Thompson. He was the only adult with Jacquelyn when she was so horribly injured, which makes him the one and only witness to whatever happened inside that camper.
So in his very first chats with detectives, before they even really got into it, Travis offers up this little self-assessment. He was really eager to paint this picture of himself as a caring, dedicated guy, a father figure. He wanted them to see him as selfless. But his story about what actually happened, it was strangely completely empty of any real information.
Okay, so this was the story Travis told, and he stuck to it. He says he was in the bathroom, he heard a thump, and he found Jacquelyn on the floor. He says he immediately started CPR and then called her mom, Kristen, not 911, her mom. The problem for the police was just obvious. A thud does not explain injuries so bad that a toddler goes into cardiac arrest. It just doesn't make any sense.
So with the story that was full of holes, detectives bring Travis in for a formal interrogation, and they start to just methodically pull at all the little threads of his story, and believe me, it did not take long for the whole thing to start coming apart.
Travis told detectives again and again that he tried to call 911 from the camper, but his phone was acting up, the call just wouldn't connect. But when they pulled his phone records, well, that told a completely different story. There was no record of any attempted 911 call from that camper. None. It was the first big, verifiable lie.
And the red flags just kept piling up. I mean, detectives found a plastic baggie in his wallet. He claimed he had no idea what it was. He admitted to having a loaded AR pistol just out, right next to where the toddler was, but only after the police found it. He'd somehow forgotten to mention that. And then, a neighbor comes forward and tells police they'd heard Kristen and Travis arguing specifically about him hitting the kids. And in the middle of all of this, Travis is making these really strange, intense statements about his relationship with Kristen. He says that calling her his girlfriend would be an insult to what they have. It just added to this picture of a guy who seemed really volatile and, as one neighbor put it, just not normal.
As the interrogation just drags on, Travis isn't offering up any plausible explanation. He is sticking to his, I don't know, defense. So the detectives decide, okay, it's time. It's time to reveal what they know. The absolutely horrifying discovery from the medical examiner's office.
I mean, this was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? The doctors at the hospital knew this was no accident, but they couldn't get a straight answer out of Travis. His story about a simple fall just didn't add up. So what in God's name could cause this level of trauma to a 2-year-old?
And this is where the case cracked wide open. The official finding from the autopsy was traumatic disarticulation of the lumbar spine.
It's a cold, clinical term for an act of almost unimaginable violence. So what does that even mean, disarticulation? It means a complete separation of bones at a joint. It means her spine wasn't just fractured or cracked, it was severed. Her back was, for all intents and purposes, broken completely in half. It's an injury, doctors said, that would require significant gradual force, like being bent backward until she literally snapped.
The medical experts were crystal clear about this. The pain from an injury like this would have been so immediate and so excruciating that it would have instantly knocked her unconscious. And that fact right there just completely destroys Travis's story. She didn't just collapse from a fall. She was incapacitated by an unbelievable act of brutal force.
So now, with this bombshell medical evidence on the table, detectives start digging into Travis Thompson's past. And wouldn't you know it, they discovered this wasn't the first time he'd been the only adult around when a child in his care was seriously injured.
A really disturbing pattern starts to emerge. Back in 2019, he admitted to breaking another child's arm, though he called it an accident and was never charged. And in this case, he suddenly remembers that little Jacquelyn had been complaining that her back hurts, a claim her own mother flatly denied. And all of this is happening right after a messy breakup with Kristen, with text messages showing he was extremely distraught in the days leading right up to Jacquelyn's death.
You know, at one point, Travis actually seems to acknowledge how bad his situation is. He says, "This looks really bad." But it wasn't a confession. It was more like a complaint that he was being unfairly targeted, recognizing the evidence piling up against him, but not the horrible act itself.
So despite hours of interrogation, Travis never ever wavered from his story that he just didn't know what happened. He was eventually arrested and charged with first-degree murder, and the case was headed to trial.
At trial, his defense team was facing a mountain of medical evidence, so they just started throwing these desperate theories at the jury. Maybe it was an old injury. Nope, doctors confirmed it was brand new. Could his CPR have done it? Medical experts testify that was literally impossible. Well, could the hospital staff have broken her back? No, the injury happened before she ever got to the hospital. Every single theory was just systematically shot down by the facts.
And the jury? They saw right through all of it. After hearing everything, the 37-minute delay, the lie about the 911 call, the history of violence, and of course those horrific autopsy findings, it took them just 2 hours to find Travis Thompson guilty of first-degree murder.
Following the verdict, Travis was sentenced to life in prison. The state attorney's office put out a statement that did not mince words. They called his actions evil and said that, frankly, a life sentence was too good for him. And so, this case really leaves us with a haunting question. From the moment the police showed up until that jury delivered its verdict, Travis Thompson's only real defense was those 3 words: I don't know. When a person is faced with an undeniable, horrific truth, is claiming ignorance just a last-ditch effort to hide? Or is it maybe the most chilling confession of all?